Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Welcome to Arango's webinar on how to build reliable, context-aware AI at enterprise scale. We're blessed with being joined this morning by Ravi, our COO, CTO, and CPO. And my name is Mark Milinkovich. I'm the head of product marketing here at Arango. We have a fantastic agenda for you here today, and we'll be going over several key topics. First and foremost, we'll set the baseline as far as why does context even matter in today's world. We'll go over the changes in the agentic AI architectures that make this a requirement. And then we'll break down what's happening in production. We've all seen various market studies from McKinsey and Forrester and Gartner saying that there's been a huge deficit from pilots to production, somewhere in the area of 90%. So what's causing that gap, and how can Arango help facilitate that move into a production environment? Then the meat of the presentation, Ravi's going to dive into our key 6 requirements for a contextual data layer, which we've seen consistently deliver enterprise AI both at scale and in production environments. Then we'll share a few ways of looking at your architecture from a different lens and how context actually changes that. And lastly, we'll wrap it up with a couple of user examples and some resources to keep you going. So with that, let me pass it over to Ravi.
Thank you, Mark. So glad to be here. Thank you very much. So yes, Ravi Marwaha, I'm based out of Bay Area. I've been in this industry or software industry in data analytics, building platforms for over 30 years. And yes, I think we have a new problem or a new space now with AI, but I think the data problem is still the same that we've been or the enterprises have been grappling with. So earlier, when we were building a long time ago, ERP was taking form. BPR was the term. I know I'm dating myself, but basically everybody was trying to figure out how do we capture the data? How do we make sure we have the business processes? BPR was stood for business process reengineering, and then ERPs were the answer to make sure that those business processes and the data can be actually captured in forms that computers can understand. Everything was designed around humans, and humans were the users. They were the people who were inputting information. They were the people who were consuming information. And every interaction, everything was cataloged. It missed the bus on insight. So there were like a whole transformation of that industry to business intelligence. So analytics and those things came along because it was very hard to get the data out of the source systems. They were not all connected. They were not all related. It was not easy to get all that fragmented data into one place to analyze, so that the business intelligence came around. And then, of course, data warehouses, lake houses, and so on and so forth happened, but they were still designed for BI tools, for insights and analytics for humans. And then in 2023, the world changed around us. We first had where there is a natural language interface that ChatGPT introduced to the world, where people could ask questions and the machines will answer the question in human or in natural language. That completely changed and transformed the way now we have to think about our systems. So again, going from dashboards, reports, search, documents, all of that information designed and tailored for humans. Now basically it is designed for machines to understand, provides analysis, make sense of this, provide a meaning, and then actually reproduce that in the natural language that then other humans or still the humans can understand. But now more than humans is also the autonomous agents. So all the agents who are not humans by any stretch need to be able to see the data connected, the relationships between those data elements, the reasoning and how to reason over those things, and then decide, which is the most important part. And as the question is, as the agent becomes the consumer of your data and being able to reason and decide, would the current architecture that you have would still withhold or withstand the complexity that you are introducing?
Absolutely. And will you trust the answers?
That's right. Exactly. And how to trust the answers.
Very much so. So what is this thing called context? Why does it matter?
Yeah. So again, I talk to everybody and I say, okay, frontier, the models that you don't own, I mean, whether you use open source models, whether you use OpenAI, whether you use Claude, whatever models that you use, Anthropic models, that is not something that you own. That's not a competitive advantage for you. That's a competitive advantage for OpenAI and Anthropic, but not a competitive advantage for us or for enterprise. What is the lifeblood of an enterprise? The processes, the data, the wisdom that is stored in humans, whether it's in their minds, in their systems, or in their processes, or in their data. So, how do you make sure that you can retain that, protect that, but still use these very, very powerful LLMs, these very, very powerful frontier models to be able to get better outcomes? So, again, every competitor of yours or every enterprise can today, depending upon how deep their pockets are, can get the best in class, most advanced models, most performant models. But what they can't get is the information, the data, and the context that resides in in your enterprise. And what feel is as a Rango is that is something you must own. That is not something that a Rango should come in and say, "Oh, let me provide you context for your enterprise." No, you build the context for your enterprise. What a Rango can help is to build out that context with you, help you build it faster, more trustworthy, more secure, and make sure that you have access control, you have temporal awareness, you have persistent of that context because you need to persist that.
And keep your domain knowledge private, basically.
Correct. Correct.
So here's
Yes.
some practical examples. Perhaps walk our audience through these if you don't mind, Ravi.
Yeah. So again, today, if you ask me, hallucination is a problem. Means everybody has heard about it, so I don't need to belabor that. But basically, the AI or the LLM models can be confidently very wrong, which is very dangerous. Then the second part is they've been trained on a data, and depending about their training data and the date they were trained on or they were released, they only know the information as it existed on that date. Your enterprise is evolving minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day. Then there are definitely in your enterprise there are dozens of data silos. Like I haven't met even for a company like Arango, we have 9 systems that we have to integrate or work with uh, across finance, order management, customer support, and so on and so forth. And the problem that arises is that all of these systems, all of that complexity, all of those things need to have a shared context. How do things relate to each other? How the finance data relates to the HR data, relates to the customer support data that relates to the order data, and so on and so forth. And what teams and people have been doing, which I find it very, very interesting, is because everybody is on the AI and the agentic bandwagon, which is a great thing, because I think we are going through a major transition and transformation, and there will be a lot of iteration, there will be a lot of experimentation. But most of the time, what I've seen is that every company is trying to pull together a lot of technologies. So whether they need to have multiple databases, one for vector, one for document, one for no document, one for graph database, and put them all together, then take out the data pipelines for structured or unstructured data, take that data, put it into the databases, then work with other tools like LangChain, LangGraph, and so on and so forth to figure out, okay, how do we make this consumable to the LLMs? And then you have to do deep reasoning, then you have to build some performance, some evaluation, and so on and so forth. And the list goes on, which means makes it very, very hard to maintain, upgrade. You can build it, but then it's very hard to maintain, scale, and so on and so forth. And out of that, what we want to solve is how do we make sure that we can actually cut down some of that effort that you have to do, provide you that infrastructure, that tooling to make it super, super easy. In fact, cut it down by 10x, but still make sure that every answer is traceable. You have the context, which is shareable and is live, so it's temporal aware, finds the right data. So if you need to find the right data, or the LLMs or your agents need to find the right data, you have the right understanding of entities and relationship between those entities within your company, and you have one platform. So basically, build it once, reuse it every time, and that can help you get what you need to get and deliver to your business stakeholders, which is you need to have accuracy. You need to make sure that they're auditable. The answer is auditable. So it's not good enough to say this is the truth. You have to say this is the truth and it's verifiable. And that's why, and then you have to do it not taking months or army of engineers to build it. You have to be able to do quick ROI. I have never seen a business leader who who would tell me, you have unlimited time, unlimited budget, and I would be okay with a semi-truthful answer. That's not what is expected. You have no time, you have very limited budget, and your answer better be accurate. And that's a hard thing to do.
Well, thank gosh there's a Rango.
That's right.
As we look to the next set of presentations, let's touch a little bit about what we're seeing in terms of, the famous analysis around what 90 some percent of AI initiatives don't make it into production. But what are you seeing here from a market perspective, Ravi?
Yeah, and again, my perspective is not based upon just what we do internally at Durango, but mostly when I talk to the customers and startups and people who are trying to build agents and so on and so forth. So this is typically how the journey starts. First is like saying, okay, how I need to build some ingestion strategy, some data pipelines, and I need to figure out what ETL tool I'm going to use, what technologies I'm going to use to ingest the data. And of course, you always have multiple systems, so you never have one system, so that you need to have connectors. Then they talk about like, okay, we have now some Postgres or some, document or relational or uh, non-relational databases or NoSQL databases, and we need to be able to put some data into some of those systems. Then, of course, when you are using LLMs, you first instinct is to say, okay, I need some vector database so that I can actually do some similarity search, so I can use the LLMs. Then they want to say, okay, we need to have some tools like LangChain, LangGraph, and so on and so forth, so that we can start building some agents and so on and so forth. Then they say, okay, well, I need to now manage and marry some of the search constructs because we have some data that we need to be searchable. Then we have some structured data. We have some docs and so on. So we have some unstructured data. I have to pull this all together. So I need to store them in another database now because now I'm actually making sense of all that data, putting it into vector search. But then after the vector search, I do need to take some of the data that we're ingesting from structured and unstructured into some other place. Then I need to do some caching. I need to build some tooling. And then I need to build a user interface, a web interface, or a chat interface, or an agentic interface, or API, or MCP. And all of that you need to stitch together today. So I've seen this story played out over and over and over. I'm sure some of the audience will probably have a more elegant and a better way of doing it, but there is at least 6 to 7 or 8 technologies that you have to put together to at least have your first instance of things working. Now, the thing is, some of these tools and technologies are provided by different vendors and different, you know, places that you gather them. So of course, there's a hellish nightmare of integrating all of them and making sure that you can actually make them work together because they're not designed that way. Even in some cases, when they work together, when you try to scale them up, they start to break down because not everything is tested together and not everything is designed for scale. I was just reading a Medium article yesterday that LangChain and LangGraph is dead, and so on and so forth. So again, every day there is a new thing, and then people said like, let's go on have a wiki pages concept, and then say no, but it cannot scale, and so on and so forth. So again, there's a lot of syncing, there's a lot of ETL, there's a lot of data duplication, there's a lot of integration hell, a lot of skills required, a lot of different teams need to understand a lot of different technologies, and then all of them have to be somehow magically put together. And then even if you build it in a prototype, when you start to productionize it, and when people start to use it, then you get a very, very different examples. It works very well in a POC and a pilot stage because it's very controlled. The data is very clean, and the questions are very, I would say, scripted. But as soon as you roll it out to, hundreds or thousands of users, suddenly the questions are completely something that you haven't foreseen or understood or thought about, or you haven't pulled some of that data in already or haven't thought about, and things start to break. And then the first thing says is, oh my God, this doesn't scale, this doesn't work. What do we now do now? So that's where we are.
Yeah, we've picked that up a few times, but I think now would be a great time maybe to poll our attendees and get some feedback in terms of how many databases they have in question. So for folks that are attending, you'll see a quick question up here. If you could respond, we'll give you about a minute just to keep the flow here. But if you can give us a quick guidance in terms of your perspective, that would be great. We'll just go once, twice. All right. So with that, we'll gather the poll responses, but we'll keep this going forward here. So what happens in the context of the Frankenstack and what breaks?
Yeah, so again, I mean, first was when people started to use the LLMs, and the first instinct, and of course, not even just the instinct. I think that is what people mostly kind of will gravitated to saying, "Oh, if I just put a vector database in front of in front of my data, and then expose that to the LLMs, I'm getting pretty good results." And that was true because this was the first time you could actually do in a more NLP or natural language kind of conversational way. You can ask a question without going through BI and web interfaces and so on, and really get a very specific answer. So, but as soon the novelty has started to wear off, when the questions kind of are very generic, the answers are very, very generic. They're similar sounding, but they're not highly accurate.
Yeah.
So that's the first breakdown that happens. So people, I mean, again, I just want to make sure everybody understands it. When I saw ChatGPT for the first time in 2023, when they were launched and somebody showed me a demo, my jaw dropped. I'm like, wow, you could do this. But very quickly, the world realized there are hallucinations, there are made up efforts. But even though they're very confident, so that's something uh, wrong with the confidence is more dangerous than just being wrong. So most of the LLMs are very, very good at wrong confidently. But you won't know it if you don't know it. So basically, it is looks like magic in the first instance, till you peel the onion or till you have the experts review those answers and they say, no, that's not true. So that's where it starts to break down. So hallucination creep in. It has wrong answers, but with high degree of confidence. And then one of the other thing that is happening, as I said, is to doing it for a POC and a pilot because you're so motivated is super exciting. I mean, if I even have to ask anybody who's in tech space, what is the first project they want to work on, or what is the more desirable outcome of the project or the company they want to work on, overwhelming answer is I want to work in an AI company, or I want to work in an agentic company, or I want to build agentic solution because that's where the world is going, right? So
Yeah.
then, but if you build it once, you're very motivated, but then the real life hits you. The data is not clean. The data is always changing. There are multiple systems that you have to use. The answers are not as you expected. Users are complaining, and then you suddenly realize that okay, it's not all fun and games. So from a POC to production, there's a lot more work that has to be done. Auditability has to be built in, compliance has to be built in, RBAC kind of solutions you have to build in, observability has to be built in. So it's not just about even getting the right answers, and then you have to be able to prove it. And then the other things that you hit you is as soon as you put more than one user or 10 users or 100 users, suddenly you're breaking at the seams in terms of performance. So your token usage is now exploding. So then you have to figure out, okay, how do we reduce some of the token usage? How do we have some caching? How do we make sure we can actually persist some of the answers and actually rely on non-LLM type of answers? So can we actually mash up some deterministic uh, models and some probabilistic like LLM models? And can we actually create a more efficient system? So those are the kind of things that are now going to start breaking your system. And then, of course, the most important is, especially me coming from a bank, I mean, your governance and compliance team will never let those agents run free. So one of the things that you need to prove to them, which is the hardest part, is not only that you can create the right answers, but you can create the right answers 100% of the time, and they're 100% auditable. So again, these are some of the challenges that are basically now hitting some of those early prototypes and projects and agents. And that's why you see there is kind of all these studies where people are saying, okay, is it really ready for prime time? Can I really take this into production? We believe you can, but just want to make sure everybody's aware that there are real challenges to make them real production scaled usage.
Perfect. And I think we're going to take one more poll here at this point in time and just see what our audience is having in terms of blockers in their environment. So again, we'll just give you 1 minute if you can choose the one that most applies to you. And then we'll share the answers at the end, just to keep everybody active and engaged here. But several of these are what Ravi indicated. If you've got something else, if you can maybe save it as a question and share your feedback, if none of these are represented, that would be fantastic. So with that, we'll grab the answers, but we'll keep moving forward here, Ravi. So
Okay.
this is one you lived and breathed at JP Morgan for
Yes.
a while, so I know you can speak to this very eloquently.
Yes, and again, it's not only JP Morgan. Means we used to joke when I was in Informatica in my past days, and we will say it's almost like an iceberg analogy, which is still true, that most of the complexity is hidden under the surface. So if you look at an iceberg, 75% of the iceberg, 80% of the iceberg is actually underwater, and you only see the tip of it. And that's true for all of these things. Anytime you're dealing with data, and anytime you have to actually build a context, or you have to build agents, or you have to take some of the information that you have in your enterprise, the hidden cost is in the pipeline, the plumbing, getting the data, make sense of the data, clean up the data, data quality, doing the PII kind of stuff, which is personal information, basically making sure that you are not exposing information, being compliant with if you're in a healthcare, HIPAA, and so on and so forth. All of those things take 80% of your time, and only 20% of it. I was talking to one of our customers, and they said, we know what we need to do. We know what the value we want to provide to the client, but 80% of my cost and my team is spending on just making sure that we're ready for the LLMs to be able to actually build the agent. So we're spending only 20% of the time building those agents and adding value to the clients. 80% of the effort actually goes into the plumbing and just the process part. So that's a heavy, heavy, heavy cost. And that's also one of the drivers for why the cost. I mean, in fact, yesterday I was just read an article. I don't know. I don't want anybody to believe or disbelieve or anything. I'm just using or citing in a source. The article basically said it's the first time in human history where the the human, the cost of doing work with a human is going to be lower than just purely using technology. So, which is completely contrary to what you are hearing in terms of like agents will replace humans and so on and so forth. It's kind of like almost you are competing with them because the agents are also very expensive right now. So there is going to be a huge driver to bring the cost down for those agents as people try to do cost arbitrage on their employees or humans' cost or cost of
Okay.
capital. So.
So I just want to take a second here, Ravi, and just give our audience here the responses to the two poll questions, just to keep everybody active and engaged. So the very first one, the question is we have too many databases and systems making it hard to operate our AI effectively. So true, 75%.
Wow.
False, 25%. So
Okay.
three-quarters of our audience is challenged with a similar type challenge. And poll question number two, which of these are blocking your AI agents from reaching production today? The overwhelming response, 67% of folks said all the above. The next largest selection was 17% at slow time to value. Every use case needs custom ETLs.
Yeah.
And then coming in third, about the same, would be none of the above. So we've got a split here. So really good feedback at this point in time. But
Yeah.
we have one more poll coming through here, so we'll keep moving forward and we'll dive right into the six requirements, which to me is the meat of this webinar. So Ravi, would love you to
Yep.
just introduce these and take us everybody down here.
Yep. And I would just say normally the specifically why we have number one semantic clarity. So we define context, and we're saying context is not just about that you can actually have similarity search or your similarity search works or you have semantic clarity. So somehow you have whether your catalog, whether you have your MDMs, whether you have your data, whether you have your vector search, and that's not good enough. We feel that that's just part of the equation. That's just actually one-sixth of the part of the equation. The second part we say is even if you have the semantic clarity, but how things relate to each other, if that's not clear and you are not able to illustrate or you're not able to demonstrate or you're not able to memorialize or categorize them, that's really going to prevent you from being actually getting value out of or your system. So example would be on even on this webinar, we have about 23 people and it says attendees, but we have also Steve and we have Malet and we have Mark and Ravi. If you're watching this webinar, you're saying, okay, Ravi and Mark are talking, but what are Steve and Malat doing? And that relationship and what the relation I have with Steve, what's the relation Steve have with Mark, what Malat does for Arango, all of that thing needs to be demonstrated because Steve and Ravi are not semantically similar. They're not, if you were to search for it, you won't find it. But if you knew the relationship and you look for Ravi, my guarantee is that you will find Steve and you'll know that, okay, this is what Ravi does and this is what Steve does or this is what Mark does. So how do you categorize and catalog or make sure that you have a clear understanding of how things relate in your organization, how one data element relates to the other data element? I think I touched upon this in the beginning, but even if you did that, if you don't have temporal awareness, what I mean by that is if you're not able to time travel, so I'm not talking about Back to Future movie that we have all seen or most of us might have seen, but I'm talking about if you don't have awareness of the events and the data and the information and when those things were relevant and needed or captured or ingested versus when the question is asked, and is there a delta between those time frames, your answers will be stale. Your answers will be probably, or I would say very confidently, that they will be wrong uh, and outdated. So, and outdated versus wrong is kind of the same thing. And then, even if you get all of that right, I remember my days in BI and so on and so forth that when we will show a report, everybody will look at the report and say, but that number doesn't seem right to me. That revenue number, I don't think that's the right number. And that's true for their LLM responses as well. There will be people who will say, but I don't understand it. I don't think that's the right answer because sometimes the answer is not what they expect. Sometimes the answer is what they want to see. So how do you then prove where did you get the answer? What was the information that was used to get that answer? What are the data elements that were used? So the whole lineage. So it's not just lineage in terms of which database and so on and so forth. In fact, what is the reasoning that the LLM use? What are the relationship and the context that the LLMs use? What is the clarity or semantic similarity that they use? What did they search? All of that also now needs to be encapsulated and needs to be provided to make sure that you can prove that the answer that you're providing is actually a robust answer. And then, of course, we touched upon this slow time to value. Some of your respondents kind of, said one of the key issue they have is slow time to value. And the slow time to value is because if you have to stitch together all these systems into multiple places and multiple databases and so on and so forth, and you have to build all these services, GraphRAG, RAG, what you call the knowledge graphs, all of those things you have to build together, similarity search, build out all of this, integrate them all together. That takes a lot of time. So that's the 80% effort that goes into building those native AI services, unifying the data, putting it into some kind of a database, managing those database systems, and so on and so forth. So this is how we define it: semantic clarity, graph native relationship, temporal awareness or time travel, auditability, and then making sure that some of these things are for developer friendly, that you don't have to spend 80% of your time stitching them together. They are actually provided to you out of the box.
Excellent. And I think we have one more poll at this point in time. Steve, keep me honest here. Perfect. So just popping up to everybody inside of here. So we're going to dive into each one of these in specific content and give you a more complete picture. But just at the outset, from your standpoint, how well are these six requirements matching what you're actually trying to solve for? We'll take one more minute and then we'll dive into semantic clarity in more detail. Do, 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 do. All right, we'll keep the show moving, Ravi. We'll dive into semantic clarity. Just you gave some great examples previously, but maybe we just make it pragmatic for everybody here.
Yes, and as I said, I mean, I kind of touched upon this already, but again, all of us have seen this over and over, and sometimes even if you have the same account or customer or the metadata is the same, you have crappy data or you have data issues where somebody says, and classic example, International Business Machines, IBM, and so on and so forth, and then IBM has subsidiaries, and then they have different companies under their names. parent-child relationships, beneficial ownerships. All of those things are kind of very, very well-known problems that the companies have to solve. So how do you make sure when you are letting your LLM or your agent loose on your data, how do they make sense of it? And how do they know that some of these things are related? Some of these things are same. Some of these things are not same, but they are related in a different context. And then the context becomes important. So how do we make sure that you are able to encapsulate those relationships, those meanings, those searchable items, those artifacts, those entities in a way that is governed, uh, that is kind of memorialized in some kind of a knowledge graph or ontology, whichever system or process that you want to use, so that next time somebody asks that question, you don't have to burn a whole lot of tokens to try to figure out all of that stuff over and over and over again. So that's what the semantic clarity means. So does everybody, including your agents and LLM and your enterprise and humans, agree on what things actually mean and how they're related? So,
Perfect. You touch on an important topic here, tokens, and we'll have a future webinar about the cost component of that. But let's just make sure everybody understands what we're a graph native environment here.
yep. So again, as I said earlier, that even if you had semantic clarity, but if you didn't know how things relate to each other, because customer definition is not because IBM is a customer. Your customer definition is because the order they place and what they buy from you. So they buy something from you. Then they are also related to you because the products that you use or buy. So it's not just that they actually cut you a purchase order, but more than the purchase order is the products that they buy. And then your products and suppliers are related because if you are in retail industry, for example, now you have to prove out that the what the customers are buying and the products that you're offering, how they are made, and they're made, sustainably, or they're made in proper. There's no child labor laws involved, and so on and so forth. So you actually have now to stitch this all together to make sure that how your supply chain or how your systems or how your processes are stitched together is also reflected and is projected and is consumed by the LLMs when they are finding information or when you're asking them information. Because those things are in different systems most often, but even if you have them in the same system, they are relating to different transactions. They are basically called almost like master data and transaction kind of relationship, but then they actually do not reflect real life hierarchy of how these things are related. So example is a customer, a prospect, and a peer, how they're related to the order, and then how products are related to orders so that you can have an order, but it can have multiple products. Some of those relationships are very, very hard to do it in traditional databases or systems. So how do you now take all of that data, represent that in a form that the LLMs or the agents can understand?
Perfect. So you touched on this earlier, Ravi, but maybe
Yeah.
a good practical example here.
Yeah. So again, I did talk about this, right? You want to be able to not only get your answers, but you also want to say, if I get this answer, was it true yesterday? Was it true? Was it going to be true tomorrow? Sometimes you want to be able to project. Sometimes you also want to make sure that, okay, if we ask for a list of customers, top 20 customers this month, that answer could be completely and significantly different than a answer you get next month if you're a very fast growing business and you close five new big deals, which are bigger than you ever did. The answer is going to be that list is going to look completely different. Can you actually then say what was difference between the two lists? Can you find that out? Can you time travel? Can you actually compare? Can you do the diff? I am sure the technical audience is very familiar that can you do the diff? Can you actually figure out what changed? And then you want to know the circumstances that made that change or why the answer is different than what it was before. So those kind of things are absolutely critical when you have a natural language kind of tendency and when you have agents who are now going to be doing some of the work and acting and not just asking questions. Because if you're saying, I want to run a campaign on top 10 customers, which top 10?
Yeah,
Previous month, this month, 2 months ago, all of them. So those are very, very important things that you need to be now able to transform or project and project some of those decisions and criterias to your agents.
Yeah, and just an anecdotal, as we see knowledge graphs evolve into being context graphs, temporal is one of the key requirements for having a context graph. But again, that'll be another webinar for sure. But
Yep.
in terms of where we are in terms of thinking about how enterprises are thinking about their stacks, just before we get in here, I just want to share the results from the last poll. So again, how well do these six requirements match what our audience is actually looking for? So it's split. It's a tie. So completely is this is our list is 50%, and mostly most of these match what we need. So we're basically talking to the right audience here in terms of the requirements they're looking for. So in this next stage, let's share how they should be thinking, rethinking their stack. Oh, it looks like maybe
Yeah,
this is
I
out
think
of
there was
sync
some out
here.
of order because we had the
Yeah.
provenance and auditability, but I think we can move on. I think I've covered it extensively
Okay.
already, so I don't think we need to go
Okay.
into that. But I think the most critical part of this is you need to be now have to rely on systems which are AI native, so you don't have to do a whole lot of work. And then all of those systems have to provide the auditability, observability, and I would say maintainability, because if you don't, then the systems start to break. I mean, that's the message on these two slides.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And this is key to
Yeah.
our platform specifically. So
Yes. So again, one of the things that I want to make sure that what we kind of propose is like anything else, when you start with a new technology, I think there's a tendency to do everything yourself, and I'm sure you would love to, and most of the people are builders, so they do want to do it and they try to solve those problems. But if you have to scale those things and if you have to build everything yourself, that's a whole lot of work. That's why you sometimes you use some of the frameworks like LangChains or LangGraphs because you don't want to build all of those things yourself, even though you could. You could build an LLM yourself, but typically you would go with some of the LLMs that are provided to you. We feel that we fill a gap for you where you don't have to worry about how to manage your data pipelines for structured or unstructured data, what chunking strategies you need to figure out, whether a vector RAG versus a graph RAG versus a fractal RAG versus like there are 20,000 types of RAGs. What's RAG strategies that you need to use? What is a good graph looks like? How do I construct a graph? How do I create ontology? Is it going to be useful for my agents? We feel some of that work we can help you with and we can accelerate that. So it's not that we want to replace the work that we do. We just want to augment and provide you some complementary services that can actually accelerate that journey. So instead of you doing everything yourself, we want to provide you some of the tools, some of the capabilities that can accelerate what you already plan to do or already doing. And instead of you doing it over and over and over again and try to memorialize or make them more production ready, we want to take that ownership and say, we will memorialize, make them production ready, make sure that they are secure, make sure that they are scalable, make sure they are expandable, they're customizable. One of the things I always joke around, I would never go out and say, we will solve your context problem or we will provide you the context. What we say is, we will provide you the tools and the capabilities and the technologies to build your own context. I started my presentation with context is your competitive mode. Nobody else should come in and say, I will provide your context because they can't. Your data is your data. Your knowledge is your knowledge. That is your competitive mode. And you need to own it. So again, whether you hire some of the consulting companies which will charge you tens of millions of dollars, which not everybody can afford. I think some of you may know who I'm talking about, who claim their flame on building ontologies and so on. Or you might say, no, we're a scrappy team. We're going to do something cool and we're going to do something amazing and we're going to do it at a fraction of the cost. But you have to do it quick. And I think that's the problem we solve. So we want to give you some scalability, some extensibility, some predictability, some productive gains so that you can do your job faster. So you don't have to worry about building graph. If you're afraid of graph databases because you have lived your entire life in NoSQL or SQL databases, don't worry about it. You don't know how to build ontologies, don't worry about it. You don't know how to build RAG systems, or it's new for you, but you don't know which one to pick and how to evaluate and which is good. We can help you with that. But again, your context is your context. We're just here to help.
Perfect. The only thing I'll add in, Ravi, just in case we have any longstanding Arango database or Arango DB customers in here, as Ravi indicated, this whole agentic AI suite that we announced in our 4.0 platform release is fully integrated. It's not a set of tools that's delivered to you in some repo and you've got to go and download and everything else. It's a fully integrated with the platform. So just want to make sure that that's clear as well.
Oh, that's a great point, Mark, because in fact, I want to make sure if anybody who's already a Rango customer, it's an upgrade path for you. So you basically can go from a Rango DB as a database to what we now call our contextual data platform. And you don't have to redo everything. The data is already in a Rango, but now you might want to expand your use cases to take some structured, unstructured, combine the structured and unstructured, build some GraphRAG, build some agents, which probably is not the use case that you were using before. But that's something that we can accelerate that journey. That because some of you are already trying and doing that, some of you are already using a DB as a graph database to build out your agents, and we're saying that we have built even additional capabilities so that you can actually now do it much more quickly and efficiently.
Gotcha. So this is
So
our
again, yeah.
foundation in here. But
Yeah, so again, one platform, don't have to worry about whether how you store your data, whether it's a document store, it's a graph store, it's a key value, it's a vector. Do I have to have Elasticsearch that I need to embed and integrate? You don't have to do that. All of that is in one place. So we have the unified data model, we have the AI services, we have the autograph, which will actually help you build your graph and context layer and the relationships and ontologies. And then we have autorag, which will basically expand that use case so that if you want us to help you build your RAG strategies or build out what's the best RAG format you can use for different kind of use cases, all of that is actually packaged, prepackaged, and delivered to you.
perfect. Hey, I was going to save it to the end, but I think this is a great time to bring up a question from Parth in the audience. So I'll just read this out to you, Ravi, because it pertains particularly to this content here. So the unified multi-model databases still require migrating from existing graph, vector, doc, search. So doesn't that migration effort just recreate the same ETL syncing lag problem? So I
No.
thought that was interesting. Yes, I know, but please.
Yeah, which is great question, Paul, by the way. Actually, so one of the thing is, and again, you might have two use cases. One is if you're already using those six or seven things, typically I would say is that if I'm, and again, without knowing specifics of your questions, one is if you want to start over, you might be easier than migrations because what you will do is ingest that data through our ingestion layer and we will basically store them in vector. You don't have to worry about like how we store them in vector. You don't have to worry about what stores in graph, what is stored as a document. We will take care of all of that. We will create the collections. We will create all of that stuff for you. So if you were to take your structured and unstructured data, run it through our ingestion layer, autograph, autorag layer, we will figure out how to take care of that. So you don't have to do migration and ETL sync and so on and so forth. Now, your second question is, but if you have all of that systems already in place, do I now have to go into Arango and say, move your vector store to here vector store? If I have my Postgres data, do I have to move that now into this thing? We will run that through an importer. And hopefully you are not thinking that you need to keep them both systems in play. I think it's one-time migration. So once you run it through our ingestion process, we will store the data. In some cases, I would have even challenged to say, if you're not too far along and you don't have, terabytes of data, I would even just start from scratch and say, okay, can I just take the data that I have rather than trying to figure out and stitch this together in ETLs? Can I just run it through Arango? Because Arango will store all of that data in key value or vector or graph or document without you having to do any ETL and sync. Uh, that's what I would do. But again, I'm happy to get on a call or we have our, architects who can help you with this because again, it may be more complex than I'm realizing. You might be further along in terms of how much data you have in each one of these systems and how much effort you put in to create those systems. but happy to have that discussion.
Perfect. So what's changed?
Again, as I said,
Uh,
if you want to do, because one of the answer was time to value, which every executive is asking their teams, hey, I'm giving you unlimited tokens. I'm doing all the token maxing that Jensen is talking about. But still my results are not, I'm still not in production. I still don't have I'm not getting my ROI. I think that's what has changed. So I think the novelty is wearing off, and people are saying, I love the technology, I understand it. I think there is a potential, I think there is a productivity gain to be had, but how soon can I get it? And how efficiently can we do it? And I think that is what has changed. So one place where we can help, not every problem we can solve, I don't claim that, but one problem we can solve, we can actually accelerate your time to value. We can actually uh, kind of streamline your architectural sprawl or your system sprawl or your database sprawl, which definitely can help that because that will reduce your ETL, the pipeline, the sprawl, the sinks, and so on and so forth. You don't have to have multiple skills. We actually have a natural language interface of our own. So you can actually interact with Arango through natural language. You can actually just ask the question, it can translate into AQL. But the good news is you don't have to have different query languages and have to understand every nuance of every database that you're stitching together. And then last but not least, you don't have to build the graph. We will build it for you. You don't have to build the RAGs and which RAG strategy, whether it's vector RAG, graph RAG, hybrid RAG, all these other RAGs. We will get you the best answer. And even we will build agents which will orchestrate and do reasoning so that you can actually get to an evaluation so that you know every time what answers you're getting, how good those answers are, and how they can get better. So that's what changed.
Perfect. So maybe for a snapshot, why don't you give a quick overview of the platform from Arango and it'll set the stage for everybody to understand where all these pieces fit together.
Yeah, so again, just to be clear, we are never claiming to be the infrastructure. We are never claiming to be the enterprise data source. We sit on top of your enterprise data source. So whether you have Databricks, Snowflake, Postgres, unstructured data, SharePoint, whatever data that you have, we want to be able to come in and being able to provide this knowledge layer, this context layer, so that you can get all of the boxes that those six boxes that we have. And our goal is to not to replace. In some cases, we actually are working on and we are looking forward to some design partnership. In some cases, you might not want to move your data from Databricks or Snowflake. We're actually working on a concept called virtual graph, where we can actually federate the queries. So you basically go to our knowledge layer, you ask the question, we will know through our virtual graph where your data is stored. In some cases, it's in Arango because you moved it in Arango. You went through our ingestion layer, like the question Parth asked. Or in some cases, you're saying, I don't want to move all of my terabytes of data, which is in Snowflake, but I'm happy to connect you to Snowflake. And we are able to federate that and go through their Genie or whatever Coco technologies that they're using and their agents. So there is a different world and different set of rules that we can enable, and that's basically the power of our platform. If latency becomes an issue, you can start moving the data, but you can do it at your own pace and you do it for a reason. And you're not in this initial hell of 2 years migrating the data from one database to the other. You can actually be productive day one. And then we don't build the agents. We have our own agents, which does our work. So we have our database agents. We have Ada, which is within our platform to optimize our platform. But you build your agents because the context is yours, the data is yours. LLMs, you bring your own LLMs. We don't kind of say that use this LLM or that LLM. We actually allow you to use your own LLM. And then specificity of your questions and the depth of your question and the reasoning models that you need. You pick your frontier models versus open source models, but you build your own agents. We provide you the MCP, we provide you the interface, we provide the capability, we provide you even APIs and chatbots that you can use if you like to, but we're completely agnostic to what consumption pattern that you have, whether it's in a chatbot, whether it's in an agent, whether it's an application, all of the above, or MCP, all of that stuff we can enable.
All right. So just to summarize, so our contextual data platform for our customers delivers a contextual data layer. So
Correct.
just to
Correct.
be clear on the nouns and the adjectives here.
Yep.
But let's go into a couple of customer examples, and then we'll wrap it up with some questions here. We're near the end here, Ravi, but this is
Yeah.
one that's dear to your heart, I know. So
Yeah. I mean, again, one of the thing, and people are kind of a little bit circumspect about AI agents and automating some of the work through LLMs because of the hallucination and complexity and so on and so forth. So typical use case I've seen is where people are saying, let's start with the back office. Let's try to make our customer support teams more productive. Can we reduce mean time to resolution for our customer support agents, which, if you believe the statistics, 70% of their task is triaging, discovering, talking to the client, understanding the problem, looking for the knowledge base, looking for the data inside their systems, looking at their run books, and then try to match and saying, okay, is this issue, this specific thing is that answer, and it takes 80% of their effort to resolve that. The resolution is only 20%, is the 80% is just the discovery and the process it takes to find the right answer. And one of our clients, very reputed company in Bay Area, they basically had a goal to reduce their mean time to resolution 20%. So it's kind of 8 days to 6.4 days. Basically, they were very quickly get in production. They rolled it out to, so they had like 40,000 tickets every day. They have 5,000 agents that, or users, or sorry, customer support agents that were solving these problems. And basically, they were very quickly going to production. They were able to support 40,000 plus daily requests. And this was clear example of where an agent was almost like a companion or a coworker or a co-pilot to a customer support agent and reduce their effort to do that 80% discovery and finding the right answer. Of course, they can't replace the customer interaction because people still like to talk to humans and so on and so forth, at least for now. So basically, there were human, but all the work that was required to debug, to triage, understand the problem, understand have we seen this bug before, and then finding what was the resolution and what are the things. I mean, typically take an example. I hate it when I have to fix my coffee machine, and then the answer I get is, yeah, read this manual, go to these videos, watch these videos for half an hour. 20 minutes of them is promotional kind of content. All I want is these are the 5 things you should do, and this is that video from minute 1 to minute 1.5, or 1 minute and 30 seconds that you should watch so that you can know exactly how to do it because you want visual. That is what we are solving for this customer support agent use case.
perfect. And here's another one, great one with PSI in the clinical research space. It's
Yeah, I
well,
mean, again, it's if anybody has gone through a medical kind of situation, we did, as my family did a little bit a while ago, and the clinical trial and matching the patient and the hospitals and the trials and the pharma companies is there are CRO companies, the clinical research organizations, which actually do that as a business, and there's a multi-billion dollar business. And the point for them is how to make sure that the right trials, the right clinical trials, the right set of data, the right kind of facilities, the right kind of hospitals, the right kind of doctors, how do you match all of that stuff? So it's a very matching problem. It's a very complex problem. It's a multivariant, multi-hop problem. And they used to take months, even if they had all of that in their lakehouse and warehouses. And now they are able to do it in minutes. So again, these are very, very powerful use cases. This is when technology done right. But yes, it does require effort. It does require work. It does require, but how quickly can you do it, and how quickly you can partner, how quickly you can provide value to your users and your customers. I mean, that's where you shine, and I think that's what we were able to show.
perfect. And I know we wanted to share some next steps and still kind of end on time here, but in terms of both either booking a tailored demo for those folks that want to get more specific in terms of their use case, we're popping up a quick panel here. So if you would like to have a deep dive, just say yes, and we can get that organized right off the get-go. And then secondly is a lot of what Ravi has talked about today, we put in a digital ebook. So if you go up to our main site, which is just orango.ai, and then on the main menu under Learn, you'll see resources. just select ebook. And I think this is the marquee one there now. And you can look at it. And each chapter is by its own separate URL, so you can read at your leisure. And then a third one that's not here, but I'll give a self-promotion. We've started a meetup. So if you'd like to go up to Meetup and join that, we have a number of tech talks in there on a monthly basis to share some use cases. Um, I know we're at the top of the hour. Ravi, do you think we have time for one quick question, or
I'm happy to.
let's see if we can sneak this one in. So it's a good one. If an agent gives a wrong answer, even with full lineage and citations, who's accountable? The data layer, the retrieval strategy, or the model, or something else?
I think from my perspective, it will be the data layer. I mean, yeah, if you did it the right way, because the agent can only give answer. The LLM can give a wrong answer if you didn't put the right RAG strategies together. Because if you don't provide the answer, the agent will give the wrong answer. But I think it behooves on us to say how, because wrong answer is not an option. Either it's a no answer, which is actually a great answer sometimes, or it is always the right answer. So if your model or the agent is giving you a wrong answer, I think that's something then we have to go back and say, okay, where did we miss? What did we miss? Because there has to be a safety guardrails, because in some cases that wrong answer can be a question between life and death. Like as I said, if it's a PSI type organization, a wrong match is not trivial, right? That has a human uh, cost to it.
Gotcha. So we had one other question. I'm just going to sneak it in the end if folks can hang on just for 2 more minutes. But this is a really good question as well. So how does deep search actually decide GraphRAG versus RectorRAG versus hybrid at runtime? And can
Yeah.
it be overridden if it picks wrong?
Yeah. So again, I think one of the things that we basically investing in, and you'll see in the coming releases, is that we have evaluation frameworks and LLM as a judge, and then experts judge, and then so basically before you go into production, you absolutely should do and say, okay, what is the deep research? What are the answers you're getting? What are the evals you're getting? And then you have a certain degree of confidence that you are able to evaluate those answers before you roll them out into production. So deep search and deep thinking, as I said, has to be based upon your architecture. So it's an architectural approach. It's not so much about how you really or what technologies you use. It's what guardrails and what safety mechanisms that you put in place so that whether it's deep search, whether it's vector search, whether it's GraphRAG, whatever you have, you get the expected answers and you get the right answers.
Perfect. Well, I know we went over a little bit in time, but Mahala just put in the chat for folks that want the URL to the six architectural requirements ebook. I want to thank everybody for joining us. We'll be having one of these sessions on a monthly basis. With the recent award of being a strong performer in the Forrester multi-model data platform, we're going to have the next webinar focus in on multi-model capabilities. And we'll be having Mike Hackstein from our architectural group out of Cologne, Germany, talking to us next. So stay tuned for that publication. And thank you. And please visit us at arango.ai. We'll talk to you soon. Have a great day.